She added Matthias had practiced the martial arts since he was a child, physically strong and courageous. He has achieved remarkable feats on the battlefield. That is why he has his own private army known as the Silver Armor Army. Prince Matthias' men? Dustin frowned slightly. I don't have any grievances with Prince Matthias. Why would he send his army to apprehend me? Perhaps he's not here to apprehend you but to invite you. Grace understood immediately. As soon as she finished speaking, a burly general walked out from among the group of army personnel. He approached Destin and Grace and saluted. Greetings, Your Royal Highness, Princess Grace, and Your Highness, Prince Logan. My name is Neville O'Rod. General O'Rod. Would you mind explaining the reason you've blocked the road in the middle of the night? Grace asked calmly. Your Royal Highness, I'm acting under the orders of His Royal Highness, Prince Matthias, to invite Prince Logan to the mansion. Neville replied bluntly. Destin and Grace exchanged glances, aware of the reason for the invitation. They had just left Tristan's residence when Matthias' men appeared almost immediately. It was clear that Matthias had also received the news. General O'Rod, please inform Prince Matthias that I'm seriously injured and need immediate rest. I promise to visit after my recovery, Destin said with droopy eyelids. When would this end? Just when would they let Destin sleep? They should be resting after dinner, not inviting people over for tea. They might not want to sleep, but he did. Destin grumbled silently but maintained a cordial expression. Your Highness, Prince Matthias has many famous and skilled doctors back at his place. They will be able to nurse you back to health no matter the severity of your injury. Neville said calmly. My injuries are secondary. I need to return home urgently to deal with some matters. Let's do this another time, please. Destin declined again. Your Highness, Prince Matthias has been waiting for quite some time. No matter the urgency of your matters, it'll be best to meet with him first. You can rest assured that it won't take long. Prince Matthias only wants a short chat with you, Neville said. If I insist on going home. Destin's expression grew cold. We're just following orders. I hope you won't make things difficult for us. Neville stood still, not making any indication to move. The Silver Armor Army behind him also looked at them with burning gazes. Based on the grand scene, it appeared Destin would be forcibly taken there if he refused to go. Your Highness, since they're already here, there's no harm in going. Having another friend is always a good thing. Grace gently nudged Destin as a reminder. This wasn't the time to be stubborn. No matter how tired he was, he had to endure it. After all, it would be a clear lack of courtesy if he agreed to visit Tristan but refused to visit Matthias. With Matthias' personality, there was no saying what he would do. Fine, please show the way. General O'Rod. Destin took a deep breath, holding in his temper. While he wanted to refuse them flatly, it would trigger a chain of problems afterward. Thank you, Your Highness. This way. Please. Neville cleared the road and led Destin and Grace into the car. 30 minutes later, their ride came to a stop in front of a magnificent mansion. Compared to Tristan's luxurious mansion, Matthias' mansion appeared grand and imposing. It boasted everything from statues of war gods, a material arts arena to an armory. Destin and Grace got off and followed Neville inside. The security was extremely tight as they saw. Guards and hidden scouts everywhere they went. After passing through numerous checkpoints, Destin and Grace finally arrived at the main hall. In the main hall, several armored generals were discussing military matters with a young man. The young man was tall with a heroic appearance, exuding the air of an authoritarian. This was none other than the second Prince Matthias Linzer. When Matthias noticed Destin and Grace, he immediately ended the conversation and stood up to greet them with a smile. Welcome, welcome. It's good to have you here, Grace, Logan. Hello, Matthias. Grace nodded in greeting. Greetings, Your Royal Highness. Destin bowed slightly. Come on in. There's no need to be distant. Have a seat. As Matthias invited them to sit, he yelled, "Bring in the tea." Soon, the finest aromatic tea and delicious pastries were served. Dustin didn't hold back and finished his tea in one gulp. He couldn't help it. He was too tired and needed something to keep himself up. "Logan, it's been years since we last met. You still look impressive," Matthias said with a smile. "Thank you. But you look even better, Prince Matthias. I'm not even worth mentioning when compared to you." Dustin forced a smile. "You're getting better with words. I like it." Matthias grinned. "Prince Matthias, may I know why you wanted to see me?" Dustin went straight to the point. "Logan, I heard you went to see Father, then visited Tristan at his mansion. I wonder if this is true." Matthias blew lightly on his tea. "That's right." Dustin nodded, admitting it outright. "Oh," Matthias raised an eyebrow, surprised by Dustin's frankness. After a moment of silence, he decided to ask, "Logan, could you share what Father and Tristan told you?" "Don't you know what we talked about, Prince Matthias?" Dustin questioned him in return instead of replying directly. It was highly unlikely that Matthias had not heard anything. If he decided to invite him over in the middle of the night. Upon hearing Dustin's ambiguous answer, Matthias narrowed his eyes and chuckled. "Logan, my old friend," he said, "let me be honest with you. I'm just a warrior. I'm skilled in combat but inexperienced at being a crafty politician. I'm especially bad at getting hold of information and have much to learn from Tristan. That is why there are not many things that I am fully aware of." "I see." Dustin nodded and continued with a smile. "Actually, His Majesty and Prince Tristan didn't discuss anything important with me. They just wanted to catch up since we haven't met in so long." Matthias' expression hardened, clearly displeased with Dustin's answer. A bearded military officer next to him shot up in anger, rebuking Reese. "What do you mean by catching up? Do you take His Royal Highness as a fool? I'm going to take you down." As he spoke, he looked like he was about to draw his sword. "Show some respect." Matthias glared at him and scolded. "Logan is the Crown Prince of West Lucosia and our esteemed guest. You'd better watch your manners." "Your Highness, this guy is leading you on without a single word of truth. In my opinion, he needs to be taught a good lesson before he talks." The bearded officer ranted. "Silence." Matthias was furious and slapped him across the face heavily. "If you act out again, I will have you punished by the military law." HMPH, the bearded officer was defiant but eventually backed down. However, he gave Dustin a deathly glare, showing clear hostility. "Logan, I'm so sorry about that. It's my fault for not teaching my subordinates well. Please forgive us," Matthias said with a forced smile. "Your general is an outspoken man who acts on emotions. It's understandable," Dustin responded lightly. "Logan, we're not strangers. Let's just get to the point." Matthias continued with a meaningful tone. "It's obvious the reason my father and Tristan invited you over was not to have a catch-up session over tea. You must have discussed something important. While I may not excel in other areas, I'm a capable man when it comes to handling matters. If you need any help, feel free to discuss it with me. Thank you for your kind offer, Prince Matthias, but I don't require any assistance for now." Dustin shook his head. "It's okay. While you may not require assistance for now, you might just need it soon." Matthias smiled, then snapped his fingers lightly. Following that, the door opened. A group of beautifully dressed attendants brought in various treasures. Among them were gold and silver jewelry, antique jewels, divine weapons, and even a few rare treasures. In several batches, the attendants had brought over 100 items. Under the illumination of the lights, the treasures shone brilliantly with a dazzling display. Most importantly, every single item was a valuable treasure. Simply picking one of them would be enough to make an ordinary person wealthy for a lifetime. Dustin looked at the treasures that had piled up like a mountain. The total value of everything was simply immeasurable. If they were exchanged for cash, it would be enough to build an entire army. "Logan, we've hit it off from the start. These treasures are a gift from me to you, a token of our newfound friendship. Please accept them, Matthias said with a smile. Prince Matthias, these are too much. I feel unworthy of such generosity. I kindly ask you to reconsider. Destin put on an anxious expression. Hey, don't say that. We're brothers, and what are a few gifts between brothers? As long as I achieve great success in the future, you'll definitely share in the benefits, Matthias said with enthusiasm. Destin pretended to hesitate. No need to hesitate. Just accept it. We'll be conquering the world together in the future, for better or for worse. Matthias patted Destin on the shoulder. Matthias, seeing the situation turn unfavorable, Grace was about to speak up. However, Destin spoke first. I would appear rather ungrateful if I didn't. To show my appreciation for your generosity. Very well, I'll accept all these treasures. Grace was stunned and swallowed back her words. What was going on? What was Destin thinking? First, he accepted Tristan's gift, promising to back him in the shadows. And now he was accepting Matthias' treasures without hesitation. What an opportunist! Was the West Lucosian crown prince that weak against temptations? Ha ha ha, great. You're really candid. Matthias laughed heartily when Destin agreed. Guards, pack up everything here and send them to Logan's residence later. Thank you for your generosity, Prince Matthias. Destin bowed in gratitude. It's nothing, Matthias chuckled. He then changed the subject. But speaking of which, did Father really not bring up anything special during your conversation? Hearing this, Destin glanced around and hesitated. Matthias caught on immediately and ordered, all of you, leave us. We're going to have a private conversation. Right away, Your Royal Highness. Everyone responded and left one after another. Matthias then turned to Grace. Grace, go and get some rest in the next hall. All right, Grace cast a doubtful glance at Destin before leaving. Logan, it's only us left. You're free to speak your mind, Matthias said. Destin closed the door and lowered his voice. He spoke mysteriously. Prince Matthias, I'll be honest with you. His Majesty did indeed tell me a secret. However, it's an important matter and concerns the fate of the nation. So you mustn't leak this information. Don't worry. I'll keep it a secret, Matthias promised, patting his chest. While he was aware that Destin had a private discussion with his father and brother, the specifics remained unknown to him. However, he was certain it was an important discussion that would determine the future political landscape. That was why he spared no expense in buying Destin off, determined to be one step ahead. Prince Matthias, His Majesty has been in poor health lately and is considering abdication. However, His Majesty has yet to decide on a rightful successor, and this has been troubling him deeply. The reason he had asked to see me was to seek my opinion on identifying the most fitting heir for the throne. Destin whispered, heir to the throne. Matthias' gaze sharpened, his attention now fully captured. Matthias had been right. His father was gravely ill and had to decide on the rightful successor. He must have sought Logan's opinion due to the West Lucosian monarchy's influence. Logan, how did you respond? Matthias was both nervous and hopeful. He believed he would be favored by his father for his courage and outstanding achievements. Each of the royal princes has their own strengths, so I wasn't able to decide either. His Majesty had asked me to consider it carefully before giving him an answer. Destin put on a troubled front. Logan, my brother. Matthias suddenly became excited and grabbed Destin's hand. His eyes gleamed as he continued. We hit it off from the moment we met. Although we're not related by blood, our bond is stronger than that of real brothers. If I were to contend for the throne, you would surely support me wholeheartedly, wouldn't you? Matthias fixed his gaze intently on Destin, his expression brimming with enthusiasm and anticipation. He had only intended to obtain crucial information from Logan, but he didn't expect him to hold such significant influence. That directly affected his father's decision. In other words, Logan played an equally important role in determining whether he could ascend to the throne. This realization brought him immense joy. Your unparalleled courage and outstanding military achievements make you most fitting for the throne. However, the final decision ultimately lies in His Majesty's hands. I can only offer a suggestion, Destin explained. That's fine. I'm satisfied as long as you give me your full support, Matthias exclaimed excitedly. With your generosity and our shared camaraderie, I will definitely endorse you as the next king, Destin stated. Excellent. I can rest easy with your assurance. Matthias laughed. Logan, from today onwards, you are my true brother. If you ever encounter trouble in the future, don't hesitate to seek me out. Thank you, Prince Matthias. Destin nodded appreciatively. Guard, bring in the wine. With a hearty shout, Matthias ordered wine to be sent in to celebrate. Prince Matthias, it's getting late. I'm truly tired. May I be excused to return and rest? After 3 shots, Destin promptly requested leave. Of course. You've had a tiring day. You should get some rest. Mathia nodded with a smile. He then called out guards. Escort Prince Logan back to his residence. Goodbye, Prince Matthias. After a bow, Destin left the mansion with Grace. He had to admit that their journey that night had been incredibly fruitful. While Matthias' treasures were slightly inferior to Tristan's celestial eye, they made up for it in quantity. The hundreds of treasures filled several large boxes, each item worth a fortune. With this wealth, Destin now had more than enough resources for his various endeavors. On their way back, Grace could hold back no longer and asked, Logan, I can't believe you didn't turn down his offer. You first accepted Tristan's gift, and now you've accepted Matthias' treasures as well. Do you think it's appropriate to play both sides like that? What about it? Tristan and Matthias insisted on giving me those things. I can't just refuse their goodwill, don't you think? Destin replied with a yawn. You're supposed to align with whoever gives you an incentive. How are you going to choose now that you've accepted gifts from both sides? 1. What does that have to do with me? The decision lies in your father's hands. I'm merely conveying the message. Destin shrugged. Are you saying you're only after the perks, but none of the responsibility? Grace asked. You can't put it that way. How can I be responsible with my lowly status? As for the so-called perks, just consider it my fee for conveying the message, Destin said lazily. What an expensive messenger fee. Grace was left somewhat speechless. How did she not notice his shamelessness earlier? But think about it. In the current situation, I would only bring myself more trouble if I declined the gifts. To satisfy both your brothers, I can only accept them. That will also make things easier for me. Destin explained, struggling to keep his eyes open. Aren't you afraid that they'll find out? And in the end, you'll lose favor with both sides. Grace asked meaningfully. What is there to be afraid of? Destin asked indifferently. He added, your brothers are smart. No matter what I do, they would never confront me. Instead, they'll think of me as a simpleton that is easily bought off and offer me more treasures the next time. After all, I still hold some value to them. So that's your plan. Grace was slightly surprised, finally understanding Destin's behavior. It was just as Destin said. Declining Tristan's and Matthias' invitations would undoubtedly anger them, leading to unnecessary trouble. On the contrary, if he could please both princes and keep them happy, it would not only be advantageous for him but also prevent conflicts. While Destin might appear greedy on the surface, Grace had to admit that his approach was the most sensible solution. After all, it was wiser to not take sides and offend either party. Well, I'm in a difficult position too. If I had a choice, do you think I'd willingly accept these treasures? They're like hot potatoes and represent a heavy responsibility. But for the greater good, I have to make sacrifices, Destin explained, shaking his head. Next time, wipe that smirk off your face before saying something similar, Grace said, rolling her eyes at him. Destin's shamelessness knew no bounds. Despite gaining an advantage, he still acted innocent. Your Royal Highness, I'm not one who hoards everything for himself. Pick whatever you like from those treasures in the boxes. Take whatever catches your eye, Dustin said generously. That's more like it, Grace responded with a satisfied smile. After accompanying him all night, it was only fair to receive some level of compensation. Grace, I'll be taking a short rest in the car. Wake me up when we get home. I'm really struggling to stay awake, Dustin said wearily, leaning back in his seat and quickly falling into a deep sleep. However, within just 3 minutes, their vehicle suddenly came to a halt. Dustin tilted forward once again. Grace reacted swiftly this time, pressing Dustin's forehead to prevent him from getting too close. What's going on? Are we home already? Dustin opened his eyes in a daze. He was so exhausted that his eyelids were trembling involuntarily. Logan, seems like you won't be getting any sleep tonight. Grace stepped out of the car and noticed another group of people up ahead. The entire intersection had been completely blocked off, and it appeared like they had been patiently waiting for quite some time. No way. Is someone blocking the road again? Dustin shook his head, attempting to wake himself up before following Grace out of the car. Unsurprisingly, it was just as he expected. Fuck, will this ever end? Dustin cursed. He had barely left Matthias' residence when trouble showed up once again. If this continued, he might just be tormented to death. Don't be so irritable. It seems like they're here to offer you more money. The more the better, right? Grace teased. Seeing Dustin all worn out and tired, she couldn't help but chuckle. How could a young man not manage to stay up for one night? All these money offers are exhausting me. Dustin sighed heavily, wearing an expression of helplessness. Every cell in his body was exhausted. Why was it so difficult to get a good night's sleep? Logan, long time no see. While Dustin and Grace were whispering to each other, a young man dressed lavishly approached them, accompanied by an imposing entourage. The man had a dignified and graceful demeanor. When he smiled, it was like a breath of fresh air. This man was none other than Dragon Marsh's third prince, Nathaniel Linzer. It's been 10 years. You look amazing as ever, Logan. Nathaniel greeted him warmly as if finally meeting a long-lost friend. He continued, I remember we used to hunt together back when we were kids, but my aim left much to be desired compared to yours. Long time no see, Your Royal Highness. Dustin forced a smile. Hello, Nathaniel, Grace greeted him. Oh, Grace, you're here too. That's great. Both of you can come over to my place for a visit. Nathaniel extended an invitation with great enthusiasm. Prince Nathaniel, I have some pressing matters to attend to at home. Can we do this another day? Dustin attempted to decline. He wasn't refusing money, rather he desperately wanted to sleep. Logan, why don't you share the details of that pressing matter of yours? I might be able to help with your troubles. While I may not have absolute control over Oakvale, it's enough to get things done, Nathaniel said with a smile. I couldn't possibly trouble you with my affairs. Prince Nathaniel, Dustin declined. Come on, what do you mean? We're not strangers. Feel free to confide in me. I won't turn down your request. Thank you for your generous offer, Prince Nathaniel, but it's nothing too urgent. I can handle it on my own. Dustin smiled. Since it's not urgent, let's return to my place. It's been a while since we had a chance to catch up. Nathaniel extended the invitation once again. All right then, Dustin nodded helplessly. He knew he wouldn't be able to avoid it today, since he'd met Tristan and Matthias. Refusing Nathaniel's offer would be disrespectful. 10 minutes later, Dustin and Grace entered Nathaniel's mansion. Compared to Tristan's luxurious mansion and Matthias' magnificent estate, Nathaniel's residence appeared relatively plain. However, Dustin could tell that Nathaniel's mansion was filled with hidden intricacies. It wasn't merely a humble home, it housed numerous elite fighters and was fortified with traps. Anyone who dared trespass would only find themselves dead. Logan, you must be hungry after such a long journey. I've already instructed my men to prepare a feast. This way, please. Nathaniel smiled, leading them into a dining hall filled with the aroma of freshly cooked food, perfectly timed for their arrival. After all the commotion, Dustin was famished, and the enticing smell of food made his tummy rumble. "Logan, we're practically family, so there's no need to hold back. Please, help yourself to as much food as you want," Nathaniel said, maintaining his friendly smile. "Then I won't hold back," Dustin responded, diving into his meal. Even though he was tired, he wasn't about to add hunger to his list of woes. "After you, Grace. After you, Nathaniel." Following a round of pleasantries, both Grace and Nathaniel joined in the meal. Nathaniel and Grace were much more refined compared to Dustin, who was wolfing down his food. They savored each bite and ate in moderation. Half an hour later, Dustin finally had his fill. His previously flat belly was now protruding, and he couldn't have been more satisfied. After the last sip of wine, Dustin couldn't help but let out a long, satisfied burp. At this point, a good nap would be perfect. Suddenly, Dustin felt himself feeling more tired. That meal had left him even sleepier. "Logan, are you satisfied with your meal?" Nathaniel asked with a smile. "Absolutely. I had a feast today with you serving up rare delicacies." Dustin looked extremely satisfied. Everything tasted good to him when he was hungry. "That's good," Nathaniel nodded, the smile still on his face. "Logan, if I may ask, why were you wandering around so late at night instead of resting? A lot has happened today, and there are checkpoints both inside and outside of Oakvale. You need to be careful." "Oh, I just came back from Prince Matthias' residence," Dustin answered frankly. He was tired and just wanted to get things over with. The earlier he finished, the earlier he would be able to get some sleep. "Oh," Nathaniel feigned surprise. "Was there something important for you to visit? Matthias' place this late at night? His Majesty has trouble deciding on the next heir to the throne, and Prince Matthias had invited me over to discuss the matter," Dustin explained. The next heir to the throne. That got Nathaniel's attention, and he immediately asked, "Is father considering Matthias for the throne?" "Not exactly." Dustin shook his head. "His Majesty mentioned that each of you has your own strengths. Since he couldn't make a decision, he sought my advice." "Oh, so who do you think is most fitting to be the king among the three of us?" "I don't believe it matters. After all, it's ultimately up to the king to decide." Dustin shook his head. "Logan, there's no need to be modest. If father invited you to the palace late at night for advice, he must seriously value your opinion. A few kind words from you could make a significant impact." Nathaniel said solemnly, "I don't think so. Do my words really carry that much weight?" Dustin feigned ignorance. "Absolutely." Nathaniel continued seriously, "Logan, I'll be honest. I'm highly interested in the throne. As long as you support my ascent, I'll reward you greatly when I succeed." Dustin put on a troubled front, but in reality, he was silently looking down on Nathaniel. Tristan and Matthias had tried to win him over with valuable gifts, demonstrating their sincerity. Nathaniel, on the other hand, only made promises without substance. How stingy! "What's the matter? Do you not trust in my abilities?" Nathaniel stated confidently. "Tristan and Matthias might be older than me by a few years, but I definitely surpass them in terms of talent and abilities. If I become king, I would undoubtedly lead Dragonmarsh to new heights. When that day comes, you'll be my right-hand man and receive great benefits. I admire your ambition, Prince Nathaniel. However, as a commoner, I have limited influence and find it challenging to shoulder such a great responsibility." Dustin shook his head again. While doing so, he silently urged Nathaniel to step up and show some commitment. How could he offer his support if there was nothing substantial? Was Nathaniel aiming for a free lunch? There's no need to be humble. "Logan, you were once the renowned Kirin. Even if you've been out of practice for a few years, you're still remarkable. I trust in your abilities." Nathaniel patted Dustin's shoulders like an elder brother would. Dustin wondered whether it was even about his abilities. Clearly, it was the money that was lacking. If only Nathaniel were as generous as his brothers, Dustin wouldn't need to play along like this. Despite his inner thoughts, Dustin remained composed on the surface. Prince Nathaniel, you're too kind. My reputation is nothing compared to yours. Logan, why don't you consider working with me? Nathaniel continued meaningfully. I have the highest chance of ascending to the throne among my brothers. With your support, my chances would be even greater. Backing me would be the wisest choice and the most rewarding investment. Dustin appeared pensive. Typically, at this point, anyone with common sense would recognize the need to present rewards to entice him and take advantage of the opportunity. However, Nathaniel remained unfazed. He merely wore a smile and sipped on his wine, giving Dustin some time to mull it over. In Nathaniel's view, regardless of Dustin's identity, he was just a subject, and a subject should act like a subject. As a prince, Nathaniel believed he was already showing Dustin great respect by extending courtesy and warmth. How could Dustin dare refuse him? Unable to tolerate the situation any longer, Grace spoke up. Nathaniel, don't you think you should demonstrate your sincerity if you want Dustin's support? Nathaniel pretended to suddenly realize and slapped his forehead. Oh, look at me. I almost forgot. As he spoke, he produced a pendant and handed it to Dustin. Logan, this pendant is an extraordinarily valuable piece of blue diamond. Consider it a token of our meeting. Blue diamond? Dustin's eyes twitched, momentarily at a loss for words. Tristan had gifted him a prized treasure of the martial world, the versatile celestial eye. Matthias had gifted him several boxes of valuable treasures. Each treasure was worth tens of thousands and was enough to build an army. In contrast, all Nathaniel gifted him was a blue diamond pendant. Did Dustin look like a beggar in need of a blue diamond pendant? How was a prince this stingy? A miserly man like him, who wouldn't even spend money to fight for the throne. Didn't seem fit to be a ruler. Prince Nathaniel, this is too valuable. I can't accept this. Dustin waved his hands, even though he didn't explicitly show disdain. His cold and indifferent attitude hinted at his disappointment. Come on, what's with the formality? As long as you support my ascension, there'll be more treasure like this waiting for you, Nathaniel declared grandiosely. While it sounded impressive, it lacked substance. Dustin forced a smile and accepted the gift. Thank you for your generosity, Prince Nathaniel. Despite his stinginess, there was no reason to refuse the gift. After all, money, however small, was still money. Nathaniel chuckled. Here's to a pleasant collaboration, he said, extending his hand. Cheers. While Dustin maintained the smile on his face, he was extremely disappointed. After a relentless effort to stay awake, Dustin's only reward was a piece of blue diamond. What a meager outcome. All three of them were princes, but why were they so different? Dustin decided it didn't matter, only wishing to head home and get some rest. Prince Nathaniel, it's getting late. I'll be taking my leave first. Dustin excused himself. Go ahead. I'll come to you when I need your help. Nathaniel nodded with a smile. Dustin and Grace left soon after a simple exchange of pleasantries. Back in the car, Dustin held the unremarkable pendant, shaking his head and sighing. Grace, your brother is so stingy. How does he expect to win me over with just a pendant? Dustin complained. Nathaniel is a cautious man. He doesn't commit too readily until he's absolutely certain. He's already quite generous by presenting you with a fine blue diamond pendant considering his nature. Grace explained with a smile. In fact, had she not spoken up, Dustin probably would have left empty-handed. Knowing Nathaniel's personality, he would have merely made grand promises without concrete offerings. The contrast wouldn't have been this stark if there had been nothing to compare it with. Compared to the treasures from your older brothers, this feels somewhat lackluster. Dustin shook his head. All right, stop acting like you've been wronged after gaining so much tonight. Count your blessings. Grace rolled her eyes. Grace, you can't blame me for this. Your brothers were so persistent in winning me over that I couldn't bring myself to refuse their treasures. Dustin shrugged. His initial plan was to head home for a restful sleep after leaving the palace. Little did he expect the series of invitations that followed, although it exhausted him. The gains were substantial enough to make the journeys worthwhile. Logan, now that you've reaped the benefits, isn't it time to contribute? Grace suddenly remarked. What do you mean by contribute? I'm just a messenger. The ultimate decision lies in our father's hands. They are the ones determining the fate of the nation. That might have been true before, but it won't be the same for long, Grace said with a solemn expression. She added, Father's health is deteriorating, and we don't even know if he'll live through the year. I've also heard that your father is not in good shape, and conflict is starting to brew in West Lucosia. They say the wicked outlive the virtuous. Since Rufus has committed many evils with who knows how much blood on his hands, he won't die that easily, Dustin remarked casually. Although those were his words, his heart inexplicably quickened. He vividly recalled when Nestor mentioned that the Dragon Guard's plan was reaching its climax. If Nestor had spoken the truth, then the West Lucosian monarchy was likely on the brink of a catastrophe. Regardless, Dustin needed to return home to check on the situation. In the past, he deeply resented his father's inaction. But after everything that had happened, he finally understood the challenges his father faced. Hopefully, that's the case. But you should visit home nevertheless. Perhaps you can be of some help, Grace reminded him. Grace, you don't have to worry about me. The heir to the throne is still undecided. If it's not handled properly, it may lead to a bloodbath, Dustin said as he stretched lazily. There seldom is calm whenever there is a succession of the throne. I just hope it won't be too serious this time, Grace said, sighing softly. The current situation was not optimistic for both the royal family and the West Lucosian monarchy. Therefore, it would be best for them to cooperate and stabilize the situation as much as possible. The Draken Essence was key to achieving this. Everything would change once they gathered all 5 Draken Essences. They might even be able to rule the world. Grace, there shouldn't be anyone else disturbing me tonight, right? Dustin asked as he leaned back into his seat. The repeated disturbances had left him mentally exhausted. Each time he attempted to return home and get some sleep, someone would block his way, making him feel like a jumpy rabbit. Even though he was on the verge of exhaustion, he dared not close his eyes. He was afraid of being rudely awakened once he did, as that made it more unbearable. Dustin compared it to the feeling of being interrupted while in the middle of relieving himself. Why? Have you not earned enough? Grace chuckled. Though making money is important, my life takes precedence. I'm truly exhausted. All I want to do now is sleep, Dustin said, rubbing his tired eyes. Don't worry. The only ones worthy of vying for the throne tonight were the 3 princes who approached you. My other brothers fall a bit short in various aspects and won't be joining in on the fun, Grace assured. Great. Dustin let out a long sigh. Finally, I can have a peaceful night's sleep. Don't celebrate just yet. I reckon you won't be getting any sleep tonight. Grace shook her head. Why didn't you say no one else is going to disturb me? Dustin sat up abruptly, looking agitated. No need to be anxious. All I meant is that day is breaking. Look out the window for yourself. Grace pointed toward the horizon. Dustin followed her gaze and noticed a faint glimmer at the edge of the dark sky, a sign that the sun was about to rise. Just to make sure, Dustin pulled out his phone and checked there. Time it was now past 5 in the morning, with less than an hour until sunrise. Ugh, I can't believe I was tormented the entire night. Dustin sighed deeply. When it was just getting dark, he was so exhausted and only wanted to sleep. However, from the moment Grace showed up, it felt like he'd been cursed. Various troublesome matters kept cropping up without a moment of peace. Just when he thought everything was finally over, the sun was rising. He spent the entire night enduring it all that way. Strangely, he could feel himself becoming more alert, even though his body was tired and his eyes were fighting to keep themselves open. His mind was the exact opposite. All Dustin begged for was a good night's sleep. Young people are supposed to be strong. It's not a big deal to stay up all night. Didn't I also keep you company through the night? Grace consoled. Is our situation even comparable? Dustin retorted, somewhat annoyed. Normally, I'm able to stay up for 3 to 5 days, but I'm genuinely exhausted this time. From the moment he climbed up Quandary Mountain, he hadn't had a chance to relax. As he went through countless deathly battles, his body was already at his limit. He had also sustained serious injuries. The fact that he made it to this point was already a miracle. You can nap in the car if you're tired. I'll keep watch for you and wake you up when we arrived, Grace said with a smile. The problem is I can't fall asleep now. Dustin grieved. Dustin wondered if it was a psychological problem. Once he found out that dawn was approaching, his energy appeared to surge. He couldn't fall asleep even if he wanted to. It was truly torturous. I've learned a few tricks to aid sleep. Maybe I can help, Grace said. Are you serious? Dustin was doubtful. Just give it a try. Perhaps it'll help you get a good night's sleep, Grace smiled. Fine, desperate times call for desperate measures. Dustin nodded helplessly. Right now, nothing was more important than sleep. First, you have to close your eyes. Then relax your entire body, Grace instructed gently. Dustin leaned back in his seat and closed his eyes slowly. He then began gradually relaxing his body. Pay attention to your breathing. Try your best to relax yourself more. Put down all your defenses. From head to toe, relax. Very good. Just like that. Now imagine yourself lying on the serene sea, gently swaying with the waves. A soft breeze whispers by your ears, dancing through your hair. It was as if Grace's soothing voice was imbued with magic. After only a few words, Dustin drifted into a deep slumber, snoring loudly. That was fast, Grace chuckled. She scooted over to Dustin and supported his head with her shoulder. At the same time, she held his chin with one hand to prevent him from suddenly falling. Their vehicle continued to move at a steady speed. However, instead of heading to Dustin's villa, it traveled to an unfamiliar place. Dustin had a very long dream. In his dream, he stood alone on the battlefield as the corpses by his feet piled up like mountains, and the land was stained a bloody red. There was not a living soul in sight, leaving only a desolate scene. It was as if he was the only person left in the world. Everyone was lying in the pool of blood, including his family, his friends, and his enemies alike. He didn't know what had happened, nor the reasons that led to such a bloody scene. The only emotions he felt were fear and loneliness. Dustin wondered if this was war. No matter how hard they fought, there were no victors, only death. Logan. Dustin wasn't sure how much time had passed when he heard a familiar voice. Suddenly, he broke free from his nightmare and jolted upright in bed. Unbeknownst to him, he was drenched in sweat and panted heavily. Grace? When Dustin's gaze came into focus, the first sight that greeted him was a woman dressed in white with a veil over her face. Did you have a nightmare? I heard you uttering commands to attack and kill, Grace asked gently. I did have a strange dream. Dustin sighed, feeling a chill down his spine. Fortunately, it was just a dream. He couldn't have imagined the consequences had it been real. Dreams are usually an inverse of reality. Don't worry, Grace chuckled. Dustin glanced outside the window and realized that it was already noon. Curious, he asked, by the way, how long have I been asleep? 2 days and 1 night, Grace replied. What? Dustin was shocked. I was gone for that long. Why didn't you wake me up? You were sleeping so soundly that it didn't feel right to wake you up. Besides, your snoring was so loud that I wouldn't be able to wake you up even if I tried. Grace teased. Wait a minute. This isn't my place. Where am I? Dustin glanced around, noticing the unfamiliar and feminine decor in the room. Even the bed had a fragrant smell. This is my home. Grace explained there had been an unexpected incident. For your safety, I didn't send you home and could only have you stay here temporarily. An incident? What happened? Dustin narrowed his eyes. Grace dropped a bombshell. Last night, someone tried to kill you. Kill me. Dustin frowned. Was it someone from the Dragon Guard? He and the Dragon Guard were now sworn enemies, so the remnants of the Dragon Guard would not let him go easily. We're still not sure for now. Grace shook her head. We were ambushed that night. However, I was prepared and already moved you to a different vehicle. Fortunately, everything went well. It must have been the remnants of the Dragon Guard. Audible cracks could be heard as Dustin stretched lazily. He sighed, thankfully, you were quick-witted. Otherwise, I would have been in danger. Since I brought you to the palace, it is my duty to keep you safe. Grace chuckled lightly. Besides, you're now a key figure in the limelight. If anything were to happen to you, Dragonmarsh would be thrown into chaos. Your Royal Highness, please stop putting pressure on me. I'm just a normal guy without grand ambitions. You'd better not place your expectations on me, Dustin said with a yawn. Even though he had slept for 2 days straight, it still didn't feel enough. This is your destiny and the will of the gods. There's no escaping it. Even if you do nothing, trouble will find you. Rather than finding yourself cornered with no escape, why not prepare in advance? At least then, you could carve your own path, Grace said profoundly. She had performed divinations on Logan several times. Although she couldn't foresee the exact outcome, she was able to infer that all major events in Dragonmarsh were intertwined with Logan. Even a small decision of his would influence the overall situation. Carve my own path. Dustin raised an eyebrow, suddenly reminded of the dream he just had. If he could choose, he would never opt for war. War only brought death and would claim the lives of his dearest friends and family. Grace, after that night, I now have a rough understanding of your 3 brothers. Dustin suddenly changed the subject. He continued, they not only have the ability to fight for the throne, but they also possess great ambition. They're the type of people who would use any means to achieve their goals. However, honestly, compared to your father, they fall quite short. To the West Lucosian monarchy, Valen's actions might be unrighteous, but at least he worked for the good of his country and its people. In contrast, his 3 sons were each harboring hidden agendas. Over the years, they never attempted to build their reputation and hadn't achieved anything that would earn the people's respect. All their energy was spent on their internal struggle for power, keeping an eye on their father and guarding against their siblings. They had thoroughly mastered the art of politics, but what they lacked was a compassionate heart. It's not entirely their fault, since they grew up in the royal family surrounded by many powerful ministers. The instinct to vie for power and gains had become almost inherent to them. Grace explained, you're pretty good at defending them. Dustin chuckled. He continued, but you're right. Your brothers are not necessarily incompetent. However, I still think they lack the ability and wisdom to be a true ruler. Your father is clearly aware of this, and that's why he's struggling with the decision. People grow up. Nobody is born a king, perhaps. They would change once they ascend to the throne, Grace remarked. That's nearly impossible. It's also too risky to bet Dragonmarsh's future on your brother's transformation. Once we lose the bet, the consequences would be unimaginable. Dustin shook his head. What exactly are you trying to say? Grace quickly sensed something was amiss. It's nothing, Dustin said. He smiled faintly and added, I just wanted to ask if you've ever thought of becoming queen. If you do, I would consider supporting you. What did you say? Grace was taken aback, thinking she had heard Dustin wrong. Honestly, I think you'd be great as queen, and the king probably agrees. That is why, if you're interested, I'll represent the West Lucosian monarchy and back you fully, Dustin said with a smile. Logan, stop joking. It's not funny. Grace's tone grew serious. I'm just a woman. I'm not qualified to sit on the throne. The monarchy would never accept me. So what if you're a woman? Dustin asked. He continued seriously. Who said women weren't allowed to ascend to the throne? Queen Mary I is an example. Even though you're a little younger than when she became queen, you still have space to grow. As long as you're willing to work hard, I don't see a problem. Logan, I appreciate your trust in me, but the thought never crossed my mind. So please abandon that idea. Grace refused firmly. Throughout history, there have only been a handful of queens. And even then, everything aligned perfectly for them to have that glimmer of hope. Grace didn't think she was comparable to those legendary queens. Most importantly, once she decided to fight for the throne, it would undoubtedly shock the world. If that day came, it would lead to another storm of bloodshed and chaos. This was not something she was willing to witness. If you don't want to, then just forget about it. I just brought it up casually. However, if you ever change your mind, just let me know anytime, Dustin said with a faint smile. As Valen had said, Grace was actually the most fitting candidate among the royal heirs to ascend to the throne. Unfortunately, she was a woman, and her path to power would be fraught with difficulties. It wouldn't be only her brothers, the entire monarchy would never accept this outcome. Of course, it still depended on Grace. If she had the ambition, Dustin would support her wholeheartedly. If she didn't, then she should just consider it a playful remark. Your thoughts are so erratic. Why bring up such a random thing? Grace was puzzled. It's nothing. I just think you're the most suitable. Perhaps if you become queen, the world would change. Dustin chuckled. Don't be silly. It's impossible. You should focus on my 3 brothers. Grace shook her head. There's no need to rush. Choosing the next heir isn't something that's going to happen overnight. Let's just go with the flow. Dustin patted his stomach and asked Grace, do you have anything to eat here? I'm hungry again. Wait a moment. I'll make you something, Grace responded. Really, a princess can actually cook? Dustin was surprised. Is it that surprising? Grace rolled her eyes. I left the palace a long time ago and spent most of my time exploring the outside world. Isn't it normal for me to know how to cook? I see, Dustin chuckled. Seems like it's my lucky day. I'm actually getting to try the princess cooking. Don't tease me. Grace was slightly annoyed. There are fruits in the living room. Have a snack if you're hungry. I'll be done in a while. With that, she left the bedroom and started busying herself in the kitchen. Dustin rolled out of bed, facing the sunlight streaming in through the window. He stretched lazily and felt refreshed. Since the situation with the Dragon Guard had been settled for now, it was time to return to West Lucosia. After a hearty meal, Dustin took his leave. There was a pile of things he had to attend to. After sleeping for 2 days and 1 night, thus, he had to head back quickly to make arrangements. Before he got into the car, Grace suddenly called out to him. She warned Logan. The cards told me last night that you're not entirely out of danger now. You have to be careful. Rest assured, I know what I'm doing. I'll get going now, Dustin replied as he nodded. His car took off in a haste. In the car, he called Natasha to assure her of his safety. Then he proceeded to brief Adam and Scarlett about what had happened. He told them to prepare the Spanner family for the fight over the throne. Once the fight began, the entire government would be involved. As one of the ancient houses, it was simply impossible for the Spanner family to stay out of this. After an hour, Dustin was back at the mansion. Caitlin was cooking while Cinna and Brooke were doing ink painting. With his eyes closed, Maximus was meditating. Who is it? Once Dustin opened the door, Maximus was the first to react. His eyes opened instantly, and he pointed his sword swiftly toward the door. It's me, Dustin replied, revealing his identity. Dustin, you're finally back. Maximus' eyes lit up as he asked, where have you been for the past 2 days? There hasn't been any news from you. I've got something urgent to tend to. That's why I was 2 days late, Dustin answered as he flashed a smile. He couldn't have said he had been sleeping for 2 days straight. Dustin, I've delivered the letter you gave me to West Lucosia. Sure, no need to worrying about it. Dustin was unbothered. Instead, he asked, "Oh yeah, how's Mr. Schaefer and Dr. Bush?" "They're fine. I've been extra vigilant for the past 2 days because I was worried something might happen. Fortunately, everything went well," Maximus replied. "Great, thank you so much," Dustin remarked while nodding. "Is Logan back?" Just then, Cinna and Brooke emerged from the study. They had been home, so they were clueless about what had been going on lately. Thus, they didn't look too concerned. "Mr. Schaefer, you look so much better now. You're healing incredibly quick." After careful observation, Dustin realized Cinna's face was dusted with a healthy shade of pink. His breathing was steady, and he was not any different than a normal person. "It was all thanks to your medicine. Otherwise, I wouldn't have recovered quickly," Cinna chuckled. He added, "Right, you weren't here yesterday. The West Lucosian monarchy sent a messenger over to ask about you. Do you want to meet him personally?" "A messenger from the monarchy. Who is it?" Dustin raised his eyebrows. "No idea. I haven't gone back in the last decade. And I bet there weren't many of my old subordinates left. There must be a lot of fresh faces by now," Cinna replied. "Since he came for me, I'll have to meet him then. Where is this messenger now?" It seemed like his letter asking for help garnered attention from the monarchy. Thus, a messenger was sent to check up on him. He found this opportunity to be a blessing as well, since he intended to ask about the monarchy. "I have no idea about his whereabouts, but he gave us his contact before he left. I'll go ask him now," Cinna said as he ran back to the room. Once he got the number, he immediately called and asked. After a while, he reappeared and said, "Logan?" The messenger said he'll be waiting for us at the Regal Court by 8 p.m. tonight. "Sure, we'll head over tonight," Dustin answered with a nod. He was very familiar with the place since he had visited it multiple times lately. Time flew. Soon, it was getting dark. Dustin left at 7 p.m., along with Maximus and Cinna. They arrived at the Regal Court within half an hour. The Regal Court wasn't brimming with activity as it usually was. It seemed pretty deserted. It was even more so on the second floor since the entire floor was reserved. Outsiders weren't allowed to enter. After Dustin disclosed his identity, he led Cinna and Maximus upstairs. Meanwhile, only a man was seated in the VIP lounge on the second floor. He was dressed in all black, and everything about him was plain. His looks and physique were extremely ordinary, even more so for his demeanor. There was nothing unique about him. No one would pay any attention to him if he stood in a crowd. "Your Highness!" The moment he saw Dustin, he immediately knelt with one knee on the ground and lowered his head. "Who are you?" Dustin asked airily. "I'm Rodrigo, the prince's personal guard. When he found out that you were in trouble, he sent me over to assist you," Rodrigo stated with his head hung low. "His personal guard?" Dustin's gaze swept across the man and questioned him again. "How are you going to prove your identity?" He wasn't an amateur. He knew it was important to make things clear in the first place. There was no way that he would believe whatever the man said. "This is the emblem the prince gave me. Please have a look, Your Highness." Rodrigo whisked out an emblem from his pocket and handed it over to Dustin with both hands. When Dustin laid eyes on the emblem, he finally let his guard down. It was indeed an emblem of the West Lucosian monarchy. Only the extremely trustworthy guards deserved to own this emblem. This was more than enough to prove Rodrigo's identity. "General Rodrigo, since you're one of us, there's no need to be this formal. Please get up." While Dustin handed the emblem back to him, he got down and helped him up. Utterly dumbfounded, Rodrigo said, "Thank you, Your Highness." "General Rodrigo, let me introduce you to the Vice Commander of the Central Cavalry, General Cinna Schaefer," Dustin said as he gestured toward Cinna. "General Schaefer, I've heard of you. It's truly an honor to meet you," Rodrigo greeted politely. "General Rodrigo, you're being too modest. I'm already getting on in years. The world belongs to the younger generation now. Cinna replied as he flashed a smile. This is my friend, Maximus. Dustin continued as he gestured toward Maximus. Maximus, it's my pleasure to meet you. Rodrigo greeted him politely again. He was well aware that Dustin's friends wouldn't be someone ordinary. General Rodrigo, it's my pleasure as well. Maximus returned a polite greeting. All right, since you all know each other now, let's take a seat. Dustin waved and signaled them to be seated. Then he said, General Rodrigo, I have a few questions for you. Please go ahead. Your Highness, I'll tell you everything I know, Rodrigo replied, lowering his head. I heard there has been some trouble in the West Lucosian monarchy. Is this true? It's not really a problem, just some spies. They have been pretty active lately, so we caught quite a number of them. How's Rufus doing? Dustin finally asked the question he had longed to ask. The prince has been as fit as a fiddle, Rodrigo replied as he forced a smile. Be honest with me. Do not deceive me. Dustin suddenly bellowed. Startled, Rodrigo fell to the ground on his knees and exclaimed fearfully, Your Highness, the prince hasn't been feeling well lately. He had been coughing blood at midnight, and nothing could be done despite us getting all the best doctors. The prince doesn't want you to worry, so he has been trying to hide from you. Plus, he told us not to breathe a word of it to you. I was left with no choice. Your Highness, please forgive me. Coughing blood at midnight. Can't the best doctors in West Lucosia cure this mere illness? The miracle doctor said it's an incurable disease. There's no way to treat it, Rodrigo replied with a sullen expression. Incurable. Dustin's expression darkened. How long can he live? The prince has 2 weeks at minimum, and at most, he has 1 year. Rodrigo's shocking words left Dustin appalled as if he was struck by lightning. His face turned ashen in an instant. 2 weeks at least, the longest being 1 year. What happened? Dustin was so stunned that he could barely react. There was a horrified look in his eyes. Although he resented Rufus, he was still his father. When he heard that he didn't have much time left, a wave of panic suddenly washed through him. With only a few family members left, he couldn't imagine how he was supposed to face Rufus' death if he was gone. Is this news reliable? Dustin asked in a hushed tone. He tried to keep his composure, yet his fists were clenched tight under the table. Your Highness, not a lot of people are aware of it now, but it's definitely true. Even if the prince doesn't want me to tell you, I thought you should have the right to know. Rodrigo replied with his head hung low. The prince has always been healthy. Why did things suddenly turn out this way? Throughout the past decade, the prince has been working too hard. Not only does he have to watch over West Lucosia to prevent the savages from invading, but he still has to prevent internal conflicts from the court. He really reached his limit, Rodrigo exclaimed, his voice trembling. As Rufus' personal guard, he was well aware of the situation. In the past, the Prince of West Lucosia was truly majestic and domineering. Even a slight move of his would have an immense impact on the government. Yet now, he was getting on in years and didn't have much time left. It was certainly lamentable. It's true that the prince really had too much on his shoulders throughout these years. He had the entire West Lucosia on his back. It was nearly half of the territory of Dragon Marsh. Although he was unparalleled, things had really been too hard on him. Cinna sighed, his expression sullen. Did Rufus mention anything else? Dustin suppressed his emotions, trying to make himself appear indifferent. The prince said if you feel tired or wrong, you can always go back. West Lucosia will always be your home. Rodrigo said in a trembling voice. Go back. In a daze, Dustin stared at the teacup on the table as he continued. It's been so long. Maybe it's about time to go back to visit. Great, I'll arrange it immediately. Rodrigo was over the moon when Dustin agreed to go back. Over the years, Rufus had been longing for his return. However, he showed no signs of returning due to the conflict that happened between them years ago. Of course, Rodrigo would be overjoyed when Dustin finally agreed to go back. After a decade, Rufus and Dustin could finally reunite with each other. Don't be in a hurry. I still have something to tend to. After 3 days, I'll take my leave for West Lucosia. Dustin interrupted as he gestured to Rodrigo to return to his seat. Sure, as long as your highness is willing to go back. Anytime is fine. Rodrigo replied as he nodded repeatedly. Did the monarchy only send you to Osnal? Dustin suddenly asked. No, a team of undercover agents tagged along as well. With a solemn expression, Rodrigo continued. These are all extremely skilled agents trained by the monarchy. Each member could take on an army. However, I disbanded them once we entered Osnal to avoid drawing any attention. If your highness would like to meet them, I can get them now. No need for the hassle. Since they're undercover agents, just let them stay hidden. Dustin replied, shaking his head. These undercover agents were truly exceptional. Not only did they possess skills and strategy, they were all equipped with special abilities. Be it gathering information or assassinating important figures, they had to rely on these agents. A lot of these agents had to remain unknown for the rest of their lives as they could only live with fake identities. Even after they died, they couldn't receive the recognition they deserved.